be self-fulfilled. And my marriage fell apart. The economy fell apart. My life as I knew it dramatically shifted, and it was quite catastrophic. I mean, it happened with incredible rapidity and financial destruction. There was psychological destruction with someone that I loved in my family, and things went from, light to dark really overnight. And what I realized is these skills that I learned couldn't have arrived in my life at a better time. Right. And I knew the ticket for my own, I won't say survival, because survival is just a mediocre word, but to thrive, to become a thriver, was to really put these skills to work, to use my voice, to use the skills, to use the talents, to help others, to give voice to the voiceless, as Becca Eden, a musician who wrote our anthem for Harvesting Happiness for Heroes, often says. But that was really it, to do what I love, to use the gift, to do what I'm most passionate about. And I think that is what we all want out of life, is to be able to be rewarded for doing what we do best.
Right. And I'm a huge believer in what you give out is what you get back.
Oh, 100 times. For me,
right.
Anyway. My experience with it is the social wealth, the emotional wealth, the wealth that comes from the joy that I receive in being of service and being of use to others is a huge payback. Financially, we can always have more. We will never have enough, because that's human nature, is to be a bowl with a hole.
Right.
We get what we think we want, and we want something else.
Exactly. Now, speaking of the military and HH for Heroes, my son recently finished his 4 years in the Marine Corps, and he was deployed for I think it was a year or just a little over a year, with us not knowing where he was, and that was probably the hardest year of my life. So with Harvesting Happiness for Heroes, how would you help someone like me as a mom?
Well, at the core of Harvesting Happiness for Heroes, we're teaching resiliency skills. And I think that is the number one key to finding equanimity or balance in life, which includes happiness, as well as appropriately responding when life doesn't always go happy. So it's really teaching appreciation of each day, savoring the moment, staying in the moment so you don't spiral out of control with negative future fantasies, or ruminating about the past, or understanding that in this moment everything is okay, and that's the only thing that we actually can embrace is the moment. So it comes back to that mindfulness that we spoke of early on in the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just took it day by day. I mean, that was all I could do, because if I would think about the what if or the next day or the future, of him not being here or something, then I would drive myself insane.
There's the psychological aspect of pushing oneself to the brink of insanity, and then there's also the physical aspect that these kinds of extreme stresses cause us to become ill. And
that's true.
The science supports that as well. And so the best thing that we can do for ourselves when we're going through stress like this, when our children are deployed, or there's divorce or illness or trauma or sickness or death in the family, is to have really good self-care. And that is a tip that I would give to anybody, the moms out there included whose children are deployed, that the good self-care to stay strong and focused and centered into what's really happening. Because for the most part, these kids are safe. They're put in harm's way, but they are safe.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that, because even myself, and I know probably many of our listeners, we know that as mothers we need to put ourselves first, because we're useless. If we're ill, we can't take care of our family, but it's also the last thing that we think of to do is to take care of ourselves.
Exactly, and by taking care of ourselves, I think we need to be really clear that it's about sleeping properly, eating properly, getting a fair amount of exercise, even sunshine, getting the benefit of the vitamin D, which helps, chase away some of the blues and depression that accompany the seasonal changes. Just going out and getting a little dose of 10 minutes of sunshine is not going to give you skin cancer. We're not talking about, baking yourself. We're talking about simple little things that give TLC to ourselves so we can be that strong, resilient leader of the family.
Exactly. Now, for those in the military and that have experienced the battlefield, often come back changed and not always in a good way, what have you experienced working with PTSD or those that just don't feel like they belong anymore in society once they come back? Almost a feeling like of being lost.
Well, there are several things. I could talk actually for hours on this, but the short version is post-traumatic stress or war trauma, because it really is specific and very different. The young men and women that are deployed, or even people who are older that have been involved in conflicts in the past, who are still experiencing these symptoms of post-traumatic stress, this is normal. Going to war, being stress overloaded, and coming back having physiological and psychological effects to the war experience is normal. What's not normal is when they go on for a long period of time and they are left untreated. So what I like to share with people who have been deployed and come home, and after a period of a few weeks or months that they're not sort of returning to a reasonable set point of normal, there are always going to be challenges because you've been exposed to things that most people will have never witnessed. And it's indescribable. What you saw, what you might have been asked to do, and you don't need to repeat the story to people. However, if your daily life is compromised, those good interpersonal relationships that we talked about as being one of the key ingredients to happiness are compromised, you're not able to sustain these good connections, those are symptoms and symbols that things aren't right, and you need to seek counsel. You need to seek, whether it's going to your clergy, whether it's going to therapy, or whether it's just going to a peer support group, whether it's online. There are even closed Facebook groups. The cyber world, the internet, really offers us a lot of options that destigmatize reaching out for help. And that's really, really, really important for our servicemen and women to understand. You must seek help.
Right. And thank God we do have those outlets. It's not just going to a therapist these days that you can find help. And I'm so happy that there's more out there these days.
There's a lot out there. And, I want to also talk about the D in post-traumatic stress disorder, that when we tell these young men and women that they have PTSD, we're giving them a label. And the label actually becomes the stigma that keeps them further away from seeking the treatment that we need. So at Harvesting Happiness for Heroes, we call it combat trauma, that we want to expose them to integrated combat trauma recovery, which means teaching them the principles of applied positive psychology tools, simple interventions that they can use and assimilate in life really immediately. Reframing what has happened. It's really about transforming the traumatic events to enable one to transcend them and go from the trauma to growth. Post-traumatic growth is what we call it. And also learn how to be more mindful. And then the mindfulness training is an awareness training. It also can involve meditation. There are several kinds of meditation that can physiologically calm the brain and the body, so it reduces heart rate, it reduces blood pressure, it actually relaxes the body and mind, so we can come to that present moment. And that in that present moment, you can't be ruminating about the past or worrying about the future, because all you're really focusing on is your breath or the mantra or your body relaxed or the voice of the person who's taking you through the guided meditation.
Mm-hmm.
That is very fascinating. Actually, I'm in a trance right now just listening to your thoughts on this. It definitely would be something that would help me a lot. I was wondering, how would I, or anyone for that matter, help someone that lives each day like, woe is me, and never seems to be happy or anything like that?
Well, I think that the first thing I tell people is live by example. So when we see somebody who is in that state of negativity or in that state of whining or a pity party, and I'm not talking about coming home from service and having a hard time readjusting. That's something very different.
Right.
But somebody who is, gets themselves caught up in a loop of woe is me, I say lead by example. So if you choose to show up each and every day from a joyful perspective on life, even though joy may not be present every day, that is the first step. The second step is you tell somebody, you know, what I feel when I observe you whining is, it makes me, you know, Debbie Downer. You're a Debbie Downer in my life, and I know that you're better than that. I know that there's joy there. And start asking questions, because a mind that is thinking and answering questions does not have room for depression and darkness.
Wow, that's such great advice. And the thing is, I know somebody that lives in a woe is me state on a daily basis, and has since I've known her for over 20 years. And normally when she calls me, I just listen, and I don't ask her questions like you just stated, and maybe I should throw it back at her and make her think about that there are some happy times in her life with her grandchildren, with her daughter getting married, you know, with whatever happens that day or that week or that month. Because I don't know how to help her when I've known her for so many years, and she's been like that. Are there some people you just can't help, though?
Well, personally, because I am a hopeful, optimistic person that is filled with belief, I say that everybody can actually change their set point for happiness, just like we can change the set point for our weight. You know, happiness is like a muscle. If you want to have more joy in your life, you have to exercise it. You have to actually practice more joy, practice these interventions that help stimulate delight and wonder and curiosity about the world. When life becomes stagnant is when we become displeased with ourselves, our relationships, and the world around us. So this asking of questions, you know, like, well, what would it look like if it were perfect to you? Or, you know, if you could do 5 things from your bucket list, what would they be? Do you have a bucket list? You know, what would the ideal thing be with the relationship with your grandchildren? What are some of the steps that you're willing to take in order to make that happen, which actually puts the responsibility and the power back within her grasp? Because part of why she may be whining is she may think that she's powerless to change the situation.
Yeah, that's true. I know a lot of it comes down to choice, because since I stopped working, and the reason I stopped working is because I've become disabled with different things like fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis and stuff like that, and I'm in pain every single day. It varies from, you know, let's say on a pain scale of 1 to 10, it varies from a 3 to a 7 or an 8. And there are times that I feel myself getting depressed, but I make the choice of not to go down that path. I do not want to get into depression, and I will do something to bring myself out of it. I just deny it, I guess, you know, getting into my mind.
Well, you know, thank you for sharing what you just said, because I have my stepmother suffers from fibromyalgia, and it really impairs everything for her. Yeah. And the pain is very severe, and the depression comes on, and it is very severe. And those interventions are critical, you know, to find that sense of passion, purpose, place, and meaning that we're speaking of, which you do through the radio shows, through the music, through discovering, you know, the discovering of new artists, and all of that places you in that state of curiosity, and that curious state keeps you out of depression.
Exactly. If I didn't have this, I don't know what I would do. I just can't. I've always been an active person, and I just can't see myself laying in my bed for the next 20 years or however long I have left on this earth doing absolutely nothing but whining about my pain, and nobody, you know, people will start ignoring you at that point too, even your own family, because, and it wouldn't be because they were tired of listening to it, but because they don't know how to help you.
Well, you know, it's interesting. So there's something very interesting about pain as well, that when pain manifests itself in our bodies, it is our bodies, and sometimes it's our mind telling us something. And it's important to listen to it. So while we want to minimize the pain on the one hand, on the other hand, it's telling us that some changes need to happen in our lifestyle so we can ease the pain, so we can ease the dis-ease that is present. And, some of the ways that I know is helpful is to have a modest form of exercise, whatever that is. For fibromyalgia, I think swimming is a good one. I know for my stepmom that's been helpful to her. The mindfulness training has been extremely